own work rather than AI-generated work. So I'm glad to see this is here. It is something we may have to beef up more, but I'm glad that that was the case.
And that's actually, it's good that you brought that up, because I have a feeling that board members every year are going to be revising this policy as AI grows and AI gets better. And I think there are continually going to be laws and case studies that are done and court decisions that are made that impact us that we're going to have to follow. And that's what Mr. Montani was speaking to earlier about the new laws going in April. The students are getting better at this, faster than we are. I have to say that. So we really have to stay on the cusp of what's next.
Yeah, this is true, but when you start reading all the essays that sound the same, because they've all used AI, it's pretty obvious.
Well, I will say this too, and it's really been university driven. There's a lot of anti-ChatGPT and anti-AI software, and students are developing it. Students are developing at CMU right now. That's helping us to identify. But really, this is speaking more. The revision we wanted to put in there is speaking more to our students' use of social media, use of photographs. They're taking very innocent situations and turning them into legal matters, police matters. And so, as adults and as parents and as educators, we have got to constantly reinforce to our children how careful they have to be with social media use, because it doesn't go away. And so it's something that we have to keep driving home. By the board taking this action, you're reinforcing that message to our staff to keep this top of mind. So thank you for adding this language.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? The motion passes. On to public comments on non-agenda items. Kelly, did anyone sign up to speak on agenda items this evening?
Yes, first is Emily Marco.
Okay. Thank you.
Emily Marco, 43 Clarity Drive, Scott Township. I just wanted to talk more about the agenda that you're printing out, because as we're going through, I know it's a new program, so obviously there's going to be some bugs. But like our old agendas, they listed the account fund, like what fund each agenda item was coming out of, and it does not anymore. It also listed every agenda item, if it was an information or if it was an action, like if you were voting on it. And since we don't have workshop meetings anymore, it would be very important for the public to know what you're actually voting on and not, along with adding a little bit more details to the agenda, hopefully. Additionally, I wanted to comment on the safety meeting that was held on, I think, September
his freedom of religion, it's his individual freedom of expression. So I question how that would be any different, because if your belief is, you celebrate Halloween, how is that any different? In addition to this, if we were to continue with Dr. Krasman's neutral school vision, meaning that, there's no expression of culture, politics, or religion, being represented by teachers or by the school in any way, I have a very stern request that something I've noticed at the past few football games, to stop flying the Blue Lives Matter flag. I actually align with this flag, however, it is more politically leaning, and it's not the American flag, it's, a more cultural stance, more political stance. And I actually think that the political agenda that the, thin blue line, follows it's on a much larger scale than Halloween, so maybe the school shouldn't be representing that. They're not going to represent Halloween. In addition to this, I also put another example, questioning if we were to say, okay, well, teachers cannot be expressing their individual celebration of Halloween in their own lives, which may seem trivial. What if a teacher had a true, cultural or religious belief, and they decided to wear garments in accordance to that? Would that be pushing their agenda on students? I don't think so, but maybe that's what the vision now is. And it also just seems weird to me that this, from what I was told, it seems like this is not a district-wide thing. This was something happening at high school. And I would just say, if this information were to be true, and this were to continue on, or this vision were to continue on, I would question why the board's conservative majority would not take action, because this seems like something that would be very aligned with certain right-wing standpoints of freedom of expression and so forth. Again, thank you for hearing me out.
First, I'm going to say thank you for coming to the board meeting as a student and speaking. I know it takes a lot of courage for students to speak in these meetings, so we always appreciate your comments. Tinker versus Des Moines was a case that established that students could wear black armbands to protest the Vietnam War, and it allowed freedom of expression and dress, and for peacefully protesting. All right, it does not apply to employees and Halloween costumes. There are religious arguments against Halloween, but more importantly, this is really a conversation between the students and the high school administration. Teachers should not be discussing emails between the principal and them with students. Okay, it's very clearly noted in our emails that they are solely for the intended recipient. But it does not mean we didn't hear what you said. We appreciate that. I do not support teachers wearing Halloween costumes to school. I don't know if that was a practice in the past, but I would not support that. And there are plenty of religious connotations attached to that. Now, if a teacher was of a certain religion and wore a certain attire on religious days, they would certainly be allowed to do that. But blanketly allowing staff to wear Halloween costumes is not something I would support either. So I just wanted to give you an answer to some of the questions you raised. But thank you for your comments.
I have a question. What is neutral school vision?
Well, that wasn't something that I'm just taking that as far as like, I use that own term in my,
Okay.
gathering of this as to like, if we're gonna limit, expressions of certain things, are we gonna limit the expression of other things also?
Understood. Thank you.
But what are we limiting? You're talking about an employee and you're a student.
And I'm a student, but I'm saying if you're, again, in my vision, or in my opinion, once, you could say that anything is, I hold a belief system, this is a little bit more detached from maybe majority belief system, is that, you can feel like deep cultural attachment to Halloween. Like, and not Halloween as in the American vision, but what if, to me, wearing and celebrating Halloween and now, limiting that as far as the teacher perspective, especially to say, okay, only in the high school, teachers should not wear Halloween costumes because not all students celebrate Halloween. It seems to me that the Halloween parties at the primary school are continuing on. To me, you are, like, that's a way of limiting the expression of teachers. So maybe my expression is not being limited, but the expression of teachers is being limited. They are not too.
So are you saying first this, then what else?
Yes, exactly.
This is a conversation for the building administrators, and this is where you should voice that, because, they have, the managerial rights over their buildings, and if you want a further understanding as to why they made that decision, I would direct that to the building principals. And again, I would encourage staff to stop discussing emails between the principal and themselves with students.
I'd be happy, I'll reach out to the high school administration, I'd be happy to do that. I
Thank
only
you.
wanted to bring it to the attention of the board, maybe.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
know, I think there's
It's a
conflicting
totally
beliefs here.
different ballgame when people wear masks into school
I've never seen
or
that.
different regalia, depending on, why they want to do that. But again, you're talking about employees versus those of students, and that's night and day. But I get what you're saying. But
Okay.
there are paths to where students deal with issues and then where employees deal with issues.
Okay. I understand, but I don't know, prayer on the football field thing seems, related to me as far as if you were to truly, let's say like, there's some teacher out there that truly follows some sort of pagan religion. Now, I don't know much about that, I'm just throwing it out there. Well, versions of Halloween are very culturally important to that, sect of people. So are they allowed to express that? I don't know, like that becomes a gray area, but anyway. Maybe my argument was getting a little too out there.
I just think when students come to protect or bring up concepts from other groups, it muddies the water. So I get where you're coming from, but each has their respective place, and that needs to be addressed, as Dr. Castagna said, in its place. So I would talk to Dr. Grasson about it.
There's no more comments.
I'd actually like to add my time since I didn't use my 3 minutes. Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
I would just like to comment on what was just talked about by Brady. Obviously, not all the information is there, but it is quite disturbing that, what, a meeting or two ago, you all just approved a donation of a Christmas tree. How is that okay? And then telling teachers that they can't wear Halloween costumes. How? I'm not seeing, you are definitely going down a slippery slope. We are well aware of many of your ideologies, and they do not need to be pushed on to our students, nor our teachers. This is very, very disturbing. You all have the right, as employers, to create a dress code, which you did. But, Brady has very good points, and you kind of are pushing her aside, but she actually had really good points. That I
To be
think you
clear,
all
I
need to discuss.
am not pushing the student aside at all. I'm just telling the conversation needs to be held at the building level. That's all.
And just so everyone's clear, as legal counsel, I'll just say these are very complex constitutional rights that are getting sort of conflated between separation of church and state, First Amendment. There are different legal concepts that are all being mixed here. That I think freedoms of religions, freedom of speech, separation of church and state. They're all separate constitutional protections that apply differently, whether it's students, whether it's religion-based, or whether it's employment-based, because you also deal with managerial rights in terms. And it's way too complicated to sit here. I think the student brings up good points. They are very interesting points, but in terms of how it works on the management end, it's not as simple as, hey, I believe this, so I'm going to do that, especially if you're in an employment setting, and it's different, obviously, if you're in a student setting, versus, it's very...
Sure, I'm sure the law is very complicated.
respectfully. And Brady, you are so brave for coming here, and I appreciate you doing that. But I feel like this is a situation that, like, that could have been, since we do have a dress code now, that could have been a conversation. She said shirt. Is that right, Brady? Okay. I mean, I don't know. That's, a t-shirt is different than someone coming in a full costume, right? So I can understand that. But if that was like an individual thing, that should have been just shared with an individual teacher or an individual person if they wore something that was out of the dress code. But to send an email that blankets it like that, I feel like that is a violation of what people should be allowed to wear unless it was specifically stated otherwise.
To clarify, the question was posed to the administrator, and so in response to the question from the teacher posed to the administrator said, let me clarify this to the staff where I stand on this issue. So that's, she didn't initiate that. They brought that to her and asked about what could we wear? Could we wear masks? Could we wear this? Wear that? And that was in response. So that,
You can't treat one teacher differently.
But why is it okay at the primary and intermediate school and they have a parade, but not at the high school?
Because the principal runs their own building.
Well, some people up here have worn different political shirts. Is that not allowed either? I mean, if we can't say what's, I'm sorry, I just feel like,
Well, just like, for example, the dress code says the principal that we approved unanimously.
listen, we're in a real gray area here because we're talking about an employee issue
Yeah. Right.
from a student perspective.
That's true.
Right? I mean, if we want to go back to an executive and talk about employee issue between the principal and the staff, then we'll go have that conversation. But really, no employees raised that or elevated that concern to anybody except to the students, it sounds like.
And that's
So there are pathways for employees to resolve matters of concern. There are channels to have their voices heard. None of those channels were pursued. So I think we're talking about money water, that's all.
Yeah, certainly.
But it's nice that we hear from the community and their concerns, and if we do need to go back and talk to anything, or like you said, to clarify what the chain of command should be, that it's important that we hear those things and then respond. So
I
think that's great.
100%, again, I applaud the student for taking action, but as a board and administration, we have to first enforce the chain of command with our employees. So we shouldn't be hearing it from the community, from the employee, before we heard it from the employee when they have a building rep, a union rep, an assistant principal, a principal. They have plenty of people to voice concerns. So I don't think board meetings are the place for us to hear concerns from the staff. And that's what this concern is generating.
Certainly not. No.
And I think we have to reemphasize that chain of